Welcome everybody to our webinar today. So my name is Dave Norwell and I'm presenting with a couple of very lovely guests, a topic which hopefully is quite timely at the moment, new tax year and how to build a powerful digital toolkit. So a few bits before we start, some housekeeping, then we'll do a set the scene. So to give a little bit of background and context why today's discussion is important. Then I'll have a really good and lively, hopefully, panel discussion with my guests, Zoe and Chris. And we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session for any questions that might come up in the panel discussion. And then obviously at the end, we've got the lovely Regina, who's going to take us through a quick look at FreeAgent for those that haven't seen it. And there'll be an opportunity to kind of see the product and also become a partner of ours if you're not already. So today's sessions will be recorded, so they'll be available after this. If you can use the Q&A box for questions, not the generic chat, it would be great because that's being manned by Stephen and Regina today. I know that you always will be, and FreeAgent folk are always very lovely, but please be polite and respectful. All kind of discussion is going to be at that level, if that's okay. Please do participate in the polls. It really helps us kind of gauge what the content we're sending out and whether it's engaging and what we can do to improve it. And then, yeah, please do stick around for the demo at the end of the session to see the product in action. You'll also notice that I'm quite new for FreeAgent. Those of you who aren't aware, all our kind of sessions like this are CPD accredited. So you'll get an email after with your CPD points. So really great for some of the institutions now that are kind of requesting you do that. It's a good way of building up your CPT points. And you'll, as I say, you'll get that automatically after the session. So myself, my name's Dave Norwell. I'm the BDM sales manager at FreeAgent. So I've been at FreeAgent for nearly 5.5 years now, so quite a stretch. And before that, I actually used FreeAgent myself as a client. So I'm kind of guess I'm a bit lucky and I've seen both sides of the equation. I've seen the accountant side. Obviously, I've worked with a lot of accountants across the country now, and I've used it as a client as well. So hopefully, I've got a good balanced view of both sides of the coin, and I'm here to host today. I'm joined first of all by actually one of my clients, which is quite lovely. The lovely Zoe Simmons, who runs Kernow Accountancy down in Cornwall. Morning, Zoe.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you keeping?
All right. It is very sunny down here today, so it's lovely. Flip-flops are on.
Ah, perfect. Can you just give us a little background of yourself? So I know we've had a few great chats about your kind of extensive history, but yeah, and particularly with Kernow, can you give us a little bit of history of how you started and how it's going now?
Okay, so I started 11, 12 years ago. A bit of a sad story. I got divorced, became a single parent, so I needed to do something where I could look after the 3 children. So I set this up just at the cusp of when cloud accounting and things was beginning to start. So embraced it with both hands, and so haven't had to transition too much. Everything has started off online. I don't do bookkeeping with the old double spreadsheets and all that sort of thing. And I feel very sorry for accountants who are still having to do that, but trying to encourage people to transition across. So we now have a team of 8 people here, and we look after about 400 clients.
Brilliant. That's lovely. Thanks, Zoe. And next up, my ex-colleague actually, so Chris worked at FreeAgent and is now with Mettle. Morning, Chris.
Morning, Dave.
How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thanks. Very well. Can you just give us a little background of yourself, Chris? Obviously, I've stolen a bit of your thunder there, but yeah, particularly with Mettle, obviously today we're going to be talking about. So yeah, far away.
Yeah, so I've been in RBS for about 10 years. I was initially right at the start of the branch doing cash, and then I worked my way up to business manager. Then joined FreeAgent, ironically at the same time that Mettle and FreeAgent partnered up. So I've been there at the start and from FreeAgent's point of view, and then I made the move back over to NatWest Main. So I lead all the accountancy practices. I look after all the accountancy practices that refer to Mettle, NatWest and RBS now. So yeah, it's nice to see that I went from looking after businesses in the bank and branch face to face to all the way looking after accountancy practices and seeing the different trends, what's going on, and that insight from the banking perspective, along with the accountancy perspective, which is quite new to the bank. So yeah, it's a learning experience for the bank. But looking forward to driving it forward and seeing what happens in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. So from our perspective, obviously it's a free agent session today, so no surprise really that we're going to be really kind of singing our product's praises. For those that haven't used it, I guess a few key things there. So award-winning accounting software. And I think when we talk about digitization and tech stacks, a couple of things that really stand out there for us. So our unrivaled support, which hopefully comes up in the chat today, a really, really good mobile app. So we were at an event yesterday and so many accountants there were saying how much clients expect to use the mobile. And thankfully, FreeAgent's got a really, really excellent mobile app. And brilliantly, as always, with clients, especially small ones that we might be dealing with at this time of year, they're all price sensitive. We know that, and it's very, very easy for them to get a free license through NatWest, RBS, Ulster, or Chris here today with Mettle. So I think we'll start off with a poll. So hopefully Stephen's in the background there. It's always good to kind of open up to the audience first of all. So our first kind of question, if you're not a partner, would you be interested in becoming one? So yeah, if you just kind of start clicking there and I'll watch it go up. And that will give people at FreeAgent HQ some nice people to call and take through the product in more detail after this, which would be great. That's quite a few people aren't with us, which is always really nice to see. So welcome to those that are new to the FreeAgent family, and obviously can see there also is quite a lot that are with us, and a few that would like to hear from the account manager, which is great. So I'll make sure that happens after the session. That's great. And that's really good. You're all participating in the polls. It's a bit of a test out at the beginning, so you're all on your toes, which is brilliant. So I'm going to end that poll there. Stephen, can you I'm just going to share these results, and then Stephen, if you possible to fire up the next poll, please. And this is a really important one, and I think we'll go into this in a lot of depth with Zoe, and I'll kind of give my, I guess, take on it as well. And when we talk about tech tools and tech stacks, how often do you look at what you're using and review them? And I think when we think about our own lives, you know, when you talk about bank accounts maybe, or your energy provider, I think human nature means we so often just stick with what we know, even if that's not fit for purpose. So I guess one of the things to get you thinking today is how often do you actually sit down and as practice and bookkeeping and accountants in practice and actually look at those systems that you're using and whether they're fit for purpose. So a real mix there actually, which is interesting. So everything from once a year to less than once a year. Again, I don't think there's any perfect answer, but the fact that some of you are reviewing them is really, really good. So hopefully today, perhaps one of the takeaways is that might be something that you want to do. It might be that you go away and look at what those tools are you using and how you're implementing them, which is something we'll also cover today. So there you go, quick snapshot view of that. Hopefully you can see those results. Okay, I'll stop sharing there now. Okay, and then moving on. So as with all these things, and when I go and see practices, it's always a kind of what did we do, what are we doing, and what we're going to do next. So I guess I'll hand it over to you in a sec, Zoe, but I guess one of the things that most drives tech adoption and why people look at tech stacks is what it was like before. Now, I think everyone on the call kind of agree the period after January is probably the one that brings that front and center to the mind. You know, I speak to probably 300 practices a year on average, and even the ones that I guess would be considered tech advanced and have adopted tech well, all of them still to some degree come out of January in that period and think actually this could be better, especially with a small type of client. So I know, Zoe, you said that obviously you kind of were on that cusp of digitization, but was there anything that drove that? So that point where you started Kernow, did you see the way it was being done elsewhere and thought, okay, I'm going to start on a different foot? What were the kind of drivers to look at tech being like a standard rather than something that was brought in onto an old kind of manual process?
I suppose because my background is business, so I'm a business person first and then became an accountant. So I qualified quite late in my life as an accountant. But I could just see that as one person, when I started, if you didn't have some form of automation, then you wouldn't be able to service more than a couple of clients effectively. So everything went on to QuickBooks to begin with, and then we built up a client base from that. But then it became quite obvious that I needed to have a CRM system, because keeping spreadsheets and bits of paper, and there's so many different moving parts. So then started looking at that. Also, I didn't want to have lots of paperwork in the office, so we used to use Receipt Bank, or now known as Dext. So all clients that came in had to use those facilities. We do have a couple of older generation who, can't use mobile phones, but they bring everything in and we just scan it. But using tech really helps reduce the amount of man hours, which then frees up man hours to actually get to know your clients better. So, getting them in, having a cup of coffee, sitting down, and really getting to know what makes them tick. If you're too busy on spreadsheets and manual data entry all the time, there's only so many hours in the day. You're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to be able to service your clients properly, and you're not going to get to know them. Also, bringing newer and younger people into the business, that's what they know. They know computers, they know tech, that's what they live and breathe. So to get the firm to go forward, I need to embrace that, even though I'm a bit of a dinosaur myself, but surround yourself with people who know about tech. I know what I want it to do. I don't necessarily know how to achieve it, but that's when you pull resources in to get that.
That's quite interesting. There was a couple of key things I'll pull out there, Zoe. So the first one is there's no single driver. So you're talking about servicing the client well, making more money, which obviously we're all like it or not, although it's embarrassing, not an English thing to say, perhaps, or British thing to say, that we're, that's what we're in business for. And then I guess that was a really interesting one about not necessarily yourself being, you see the advantage of tech, but maybe accepting that there are other people that are going to drive it forward. And I'd like to explore that in a bit of depth in a minute. Just a quick one to kind of back that up, Zoe, in terms of that point about what people expect. So I think and even at my time at FreeAgent, in the 5 years I've been there, I've seen this slowly change as I've worked with practices. Putting up a few stats here to kind of, I guess, address that kind of tech point, that we are in a period of huge tech adoption, especially of a certain generation. So people are now coming through. So my children, for example, who tech is second nature, the way they use it is kind of very intuitive and very embedded in how they are. So I think that old idea of introducing tech as something they're not used to has gone, and that kind of seems to be what you're saying there, Zoe. I guess the other point was the kind of being software agnostic, which I'm really glad you mentioned the other providers. Obviously, we're kind of presenting with FreeAgent today, but I think one of the first things I always do when I go into a practice is get a big kind of whiteboard out, and we kind of draw out what the process flow and tech stacks are. So interestingly, we've got a couple of poll questions that tie in with that. So Stephen, if you'd like to kind of start the first one up, if that's okay. So again, continuing that agnostic theme, which I think is great. What kind of software are you considering this year, everyone? Is it maybe you've got your bookkeeping software kind of nailed, or maybe you've got it nailed, and maybe you're looking at something like practice management or forecasting? I think, Zoe, you were mentioning there that as you get into tech, it's one of the things that you uncover more things you can do, more tools you can use. Yeah. And interesting, what I'm seeing here is some really, really interesting results coming through, and I'll share these in a sec. Okay, I'm just going to end it now. And hopefully you'll be able to see this. So what's very interesting there is a real trend towards perhaps the next level of tech. So maybe where you mentioned kind of QuickBooks and FreeAgent, Zoe, where now you've got the other kind of practice management or forecasting tools being looked at, which is really great to hear. Okay, so Stephen, if you fire up the next poll, if that's okay. Hopefully it's going to come up soon. Okay, ready when you are, Stephen.
Oh, sorry, David, just one poll for this section.
Oh, one poll. My mistake. Sorry about that. Okay, so the first point there, Zoe, you made about choosing the right tech tools. Now, as I said, being completely honest, when I go into a practice, my approach is quite agnostic. So I always think that, it's the right tool for the right kind of client. So if we kind of take a quick kind of walk through how you selected each of those tools. So start with the kind of first layer, which is, I guess, bookkeeping. So we'll know FreeAgent today. What were the main kind of things that you looked at when you were selecting those first really important tools? So the tools that your clients would be interacting with on a hopefully kind of daily, weekly basis.
I think one of the most important things for the client is that it's clear and easy to use. All bookkeeping software does bookkeeping, but it's how it's presented to the client. One of the market leaders, Sage, is very good for larger businesses, but for the small and medium-sized businesses, it's not user-friendly, or it wasn't when I was looking back when I was doing QuickBooks, which is why we chose QuickBooks. We then found that the service level was deteriorating, and then we came on board with FreeAgent, and we're gradually moving the majority of our clients over. And the reason we like FreeAgent is the support, the way that the roadmap is very visual, so we know what's happening and we can get involved with it. But more importantly, it's really easy for the clients to use. And we talk about tech stack and we talk about automation and things, but if people aren't going to use it, it's pointless having it. So it needs to be user friendly, and FreeAgent is really good. And then we also make sure that all our other tech that we have is user friendly. And if it doesn't become user friendly, or the upkeep is no good, or the support that we get as the client from the company, then we will start looking elsewhere. And it's really important to build up that relationship, have a two-way conversation, because also if you don't encourage the software developers to move in the direction where you see, they're not going to know. Not taking anything away from software developers, they're usually not accountants, they're not usually working on the front end, they don't usually speak to the clients. So it's really important to have that relationship where we can help mold and develop software. So yeah, it's just good for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. That's a really important point about user-driven development. And again, we were chatting about this event I was at yesterday, that one of the main things you hear from accountants were it was built by a software developer and we've never been involved. What we're really trying to do at FreeAgent is use that feedback from our partners to drive the product. And hopefully a lot of the people on the call today will have seen some of the developments through that are very accountant centric, I'll say. We call them the kind of bread and butter table stakes type functionality that we're building now into FreeAgent, that has come from feedback from people like you, to be honest, Zoe. So that's really interesting. So it's very much client-led, what fits the client, which is, to be honest, the approach I think is great. I think two bits I'd like to chat about now are kind of that further bit of tech stackery, I'll call it that. And then I'd like to bring Chris in because of the banking side, because I think that's where it gets really interesting. So in terms of kind of the next step, and we saw in the poll there, Zoe, that people are kind of probably quite comfortable maybe with their bookkeeping tools, or even a couple, which I think is always great, depending, as you say, on the client. What do you then look for as the kind of next primary tool in use? Would it be something like accounts production or practice management? Where do you go next in kind of rounding out the tech stack, where you've got the information from the client, and now we need to either manage the client or to get that into something else to produce our final accounts and tax returns, etc., etc.
So the way that I worked, it was spreadsheet, and my next tech stack was doing the account production, because that needed to be nice and quick. Using HMRC tools back then was horrendous. So that was a real time saver. So I personally did bookkeeping, then the accounting. Along with the bookkeeping came the data entry of that. Then we started looking at CRM, and then doing all the add-ons with that. I would always suggest that people do it that way. Get the basics right, and then it will grow.
So it's almost, we get the kind of flow of client information into our central systems, and then producing those out. And then, as you say, the next step being the kind of add-ons, and we might talk about those in a bit, the kind of, the forecasting tools or whatever they may be that are now on the market. So quite a logical step through what that tech stack looks like. That's really interesting. I think, Chris, if I can bring you in there. So again, I'm going to use my own personal story here. So a long time ago, when I was kind of in early stage startups, I was always the one that had to go and set the business bank account up. And it was various days of horrendous, whatever kind of provider we're using. It was go along to the high street, maybe catch the manager, persuade them you were viable for an account, and then wait for however many weeks. I think with Mettle, Chris, this is another kind of element, a kind of brick in the wall in terms of a tech stack. How do you see that change from how we used to do banking and how clients expected banking to be done with what Mettle can offer now?
I think it's totally different, Dave, in terms of what accountants and clients are looking for now. I think especially customers are looking for something fast, something reliable. And I think accountants before perhaps let the client choose the bank account. But I think now, as time is developing, I think accountants are very wary of what banks they can probably refer. And I think Starling, who's prop to them, I think they kind of changed how banking is perceived into fast, easy, something reliable. And I think that's transcended onto accountants. Whereas now, I think accountants would have an option of bank accounts that they would prefer their clients to use, especially startups. So when they're looking at something, they're thinking, what sector do I provide it for? Is it reliable? Can I trust referring clients to that? And how is it going to work with the account software that I use? Because initially in NTD for VAT, you would know yourself, it was just a bank feed. It's just data getting transferred to one to the other. With Mettle, it's a little bit different because now we've got a bank feed, we've got receipt capture, we've got the tax timeline, we've got everything talking between two softwares, which is really powerful in terms of how the client looks at things. So going back 10 years ago, when you speak to a bank manager, that's been taken away. But then all you need to do now is open up your phone and you've got your whole business and real-time information, primarily driven from the bookkeeping and the banking software, which for yourself, probably 10 years ago, you're waiting to speak to a bank manager, waiting 3 weeks for your account to open up, to potentially getting all that bank account opened, connected with FreeAgent and Zoe. Then I'm sure you'll sell the dream to them how their business is looking within 3 days, which is an unbelievable solution for any sort of business.
Yeah, and I guess so. As Chris says there, that kind of, I guess, duality. You've got the client expectation, so everyone expects things instantly now. But on the other hand, where you're setting up, for example, FreeAgent and Mettle at the same time, I know within Kernow, Zoe, you've done that a huge amount with clients. Is that a smooth process? How have you kind of bedded that into your systems, and how indeed the clients kind of react to that?
It's brilliant. I can't praise it enough. Within 2 to 3 days, a client can be set up with a business bank account. We can set up the FreeAgent. Everything gets fed into it. We can also put other bank accounts in to FreeAgent. We sell it to the clients when they come in that we're like an artificial bank manager. You used to go to NatWest and have to go and make an appointment and sit down. Now the bank manager is on their phone. So we come in, we talk them through the process of opening up the account. They then come back to us, usually 1, sometimes 2, 3 days later with the bank details. We can then set up their FreeAgent account, and they can be up and running and doing invoices and paying bills in a couple of days. And it's just so quick and easy for them. They don't need to be tech savvy. They just need to have a mobile phone and a finger that's not too big to go on there. we do have a couple of builders who struggle because their fingers are too big. But that's all they need. So talking about being tech savvy, it isn't necessarily that, they can do fantastic things with computers. They just need to have a mobile phone, and you can get people online, teach them very easily how to create an invoice on FreeAgent, and then they've got the backup of the Mettle bank account doing the direct feed in. So the tech is in the background. They don't have to be techie themselves.
That's a really good point. I've got one client who I won't name for obvious reasons, but when they present FreeAgent, they don't call it accounting software, they call it the mobile app, because like you say, I think for clients, the resistance is often psychological, and if you can help them through and make it easy, it makes it so much easier to get the final result, which is at the end of the day, the information that we want in a timely manner.
Yeah.
I think the other bit that I see as a trend, and I think Chris, you'll have seen it from the Mettle angle, and Zoe obviously within practice. A lot of people probably on the call today will be like, right, if I could press a magic button, and I've actually had a practice owner say this, but if I could press a button, all my accounts will be on the software, everyone will be digitized, everyone will be, you know, filing on time or before, we'd be able to give proactive advice, all these things that digitalization gives us. But therein lies the problem point, which is the implementation or the deployment of a plan. So I'm sure we got people on the call saying, I'd love to do that, but this is a kind of barrier. And I think the two barriers are client side, which we've played with a little bit there. So in terms of how to sell it to the client, in terms of internal implementation, so within the practice, getting everyone on board with that digitalization is the right thing to do, but B, more importantly, that everyone's on the same kind of page. What kind of approach do you think it works well or has worked well for you in terms of getting everyone in Kernow bought in? And I know you're a very powerful and persuasive personality, so I know some of that must play into it. But are there things like you mentioned, kind of devolving stuff onto other people, giving other people ownership? What kind of ways can you do to get the digitalization process as smooth as it can be?
I'm a great believer in getting other people to embrace it and own it. I'm just the captain of the ship. I'm not there to do all the jobs. I'm very fortunate that I've got Jago, who works with me, who's very, very techie and loves doing that side of it. And then the other members of the team, we just ensure that on our weekly team meetings that they have enough training, they understand what they're doing. So it's giving them very clear pathways and trying to keep processes as conformed as possible. There's always going to be quirks. There's always going to be clients who, you know, don't want to be contacted by email and only by SMS. There's always going to be those quirks. But if you can get your processes to be fairly regimented, it's good for the staff because they know what they need to do. It's easier for me to track so I can see when something is slipping, but it's also good for the client because you can manage their expectations. So depending on what package they come in on, they know whether their accounts are going to be reconciled up to a weekly basis or a monthly basis, depending on how much they want to spend with us. But yeah, just having that conformity there really helps everybody. But getting that feedback from staff and making sure that they do buy in, I think when you're implementing change, it's very important because nobody likes change. You know, I don't like change, staff don't like change. So listening to their concerns, but dealing with them, don't let them fester, don't let them become an issue, or there's one person in the team who doesn't want to do it and does it their own way because they think that's better. You've got to get that conformity, and sometimes there is a little bit of kickback if you've got a team that you're trying to change direction, but it's definitely worth persevering and keeping going with it.
I think that's a really good point. I think the one thing I'd say, I'll call it the bit of the LinkedIn phenomena. I think there's a tendency with all social media really, but I guess LinkedIn is very specific to our industry. Often you'll see practices will give out the good news stories and they'll give I guess a very positive spin on digitization and getting the right tech stack in. I can tell everyone firsthand in every single practice and project I've been involved in, like you say, Zoe, they're never all perfect. And some of them are a lot less perfect than you probably realize once you kind of get under the hood. I think the one commonality with all the ones that are success is on some level, everyone's been in a room at the beginning and kind of had their say and bought into it. And that might be for a smaller practice quite easy. And obviously the larger the practice gets, the harder it gets. But I do think it's vital that from at the beginning, there's that kind of sense of kind of unity and going for the same common goals. And I think that kind of translates into our next question. So obviously the team side there that you've covered is really important. Chris, like with Mettle itself, and I guess FreeAgent really, because it's one of the things probably I work with most on practices. What kind of messaging do you think is right for clients? And importantly, what kind of messaging do you think is right for practices to give clients? So from, I guess, our perspective, from a Mettle perspective, how do you try and sell Mettle to clients? And when you work with a practice like Zoe, how do you help them kind of get the message across? Because obviously Zoe's just selling our product for us very kindly in a way. So yeah, those two elements, how do you think they're best done?
Yeah, I think the question I always ask is, what do you want to achieve in your practice? Is it full digitization? Is it preparing for MTD income tax? Is it what is going on? And then we kind of take it from there. I think going from like the start of the year, we've seen a massive change in perception of, for example, businesses using personal accounts and trying to find not a quick win, so to speak, but I think a light bulbs went off for many businesses just to try and change it over. So the messaging that we always use, which is quite easy for Mettle to say, is that we're completely free. You get FreeAgent for free, which is an easy sell, so to speak. But I think everybody's always looking for what's in it for me. So when I'm saying to a practice, you can get Mettle for free, you can get FreeAgent for free, but to then prepare that for a client to say, look, your business banking will all be organised, plus you'll get FreeAgent for free, and you'll have all your bookkeeping for free. This is what it'll change in your business. I think that's always really powerful to always understand, to say, what are you getting from me recommending this? And I think that always manages to just hit that light bulb. And that can go with anything that you're trying to achieve in your practice. You can traffic light your clients to say, this could be an easy client to change over. These are the ones I need to focus on. But as long as you've got a clear goal in your head about what you want to achieve with your practice, I think your messaging can go on with that and say, I'm trying to achieve this, and this is the clients that I'm going to use to help me achieve that. And then you'll start to see the domino effect, and you'll find something that clicks or works really, really well.
That's a good point. I always use my brother-in-law. I think I've told you this about Zoe a couple of times, but my brother-in-law's an electrician, and obviously the way I've always worked with FreeAgent with Mettle and stuff is always kind of like to try it myself with people I know, because I think you get the best kind of feedback from them. Sometimes it's not always great, but interestingly, so he's probably a typical, I would say, very typical FreeAgent Mettle client. So he's a fairly young, so millennial-ish kind of electrician who was very much manually records based before. Also, interestingly, quite resistant to tech, if I'm honest, which is weird because on every other level of his life, he kind of used technology. But what you're saying there, Chris, was interesting because I think he immediately could see inherently kind of see the benefits of the software. Obviously, there was the advantage that when they're resistant, they don't have to pay, which I think is powerful with that Mettle FreeAgent combination. But I think, I mean, it wasn't high praise, but when I asked him how it was getting on with it, he said, yeah, it's quite easy. Now, obviously you would never use that in a marketing junk, right? Because it's not particularly effusive. But for me, that was really interesting because that was someone that was technically probably, hard to get on software, hard to get on a business bank account. He'd taken to it as much where probably wasn't even thinking too much about it. And I guess so when you think about, because you work with a huge kind of range of clients, and I guess some of them would be, and I think you mentioned it earlier, tagged as maybe digitally resistant, shall we say? Do you find that in essence, while they might not come through the door, shouting and screaming about how amazing it is, but they get that kind of quiet, steady adoption?
We haven't had anybody who we've put onto Mettle and FreeAgent say, I don't like it and I want to come off. That is it. Some have needed a little bit more guidance. Some have had a few more cups of coffee with us, and this is how you do it. So showing them again, typically the older generation, but we've not had one client who has come away from it. It helps us as well, because we can then bill them monthly. So as a business model, it works. I always say, my granddad's saying is, look after the pennies and the pounds look after themselves. Getting a free bank account and free FreeAgent bookkeeping account saves roughly £35–40 a month, unless you were going to go and buy something off the shelf and have a business bank account. And that's just a really good hook to get people in. And then any concerns that they have is very quickly overridden by that. Oh, I can have a few extra cups of coffee this week. And I think people shouldn't be scared of it. I've got somebody who's in their 80s and using it. So it is easy, and you don't need to be tech savvy. You really don't.
And I think, sorry, Chris, carry on.
Just to put on, Zoe makes a really good point as well. I think you'll probably see this as well, Zoe, now, is that clients historically with old business bank accounts are getting charged quite a lot of money for what they do banking nowadays. So especially with cash, especially standing orders and direct debits, you're essentially getting charged for using your account. So I think there's more of a magnifying glass now to say, why am I paying £100 for my banking charges now? Why am I doing this? And I think that's where the challenger banks are starting to come into play to say, well, you don't need to pay for that. It's free. So I just think everything's probably under a microscope now in a business bank, and people are starting to realise it's probably not as much hassle when they start using it. And I think that's the best compliment someone can say. Oh, how's it going? Yeah, it's all right. Because there's no,
Yeah.
it's neither
Yeah.
good nor
That's
bad.
okay.
It's just doing the job that it's meant to do, which is probably the best compliment.
But if there is a little bit of kickback, or I don't want to change my bank account, they don't have to begin with. They can open up the Mettle account and have the FreeAgent account, and then maybe in 6 months' time, they can then close down their Barclays account or whatever they've got. They don't have to do it there and then. So it can be a process that we can take them through. It doesn't have to be an all-in straight away. Which is really good. And they can still get the bank fees from the other banks into FreeAgent.
Yep, really interesting. And I think at the end, we'll kind of round off the tech stack, how we can take they're on now, how we can talk about other tools maybe at the end. So we'll bring that into the conversation. But I guess if we've kind of got the clients on to an extent, so my brother-in-law, etc., your clients, though, they're all on, they're kind of happy. At the end of the day, it's just a label unless it has a tangible effect. So I guess I'll start with an anonymized kind of case study from internally at FreeAgent. So one of my colleagues was working with, and I will mention the word, and apologies in advance, it's a project for kind of small clients that were digitally perhaps difficult. To cut a very long story short, there was kind of resistance within the practice. They were all eventually transitioned on. And then my colleague produced a report for them, which kind of, I guess, highlighted the benefits of the digitalisation. There were some really, really interesting things in there. So, for instance, some of the metrics we saw were that a number of account managers that were managing that bank of manual record clients came down hugely. So it was, I can't remember the exact figures, but something like 24 to, I think it was 6 in the end. Interesting, Zoe, going to your point there, they only had one churn off. So they had one client leave, that big bank of clients that everyone thought was non-digitized. So I think from our perspective, we were able to show them that it works. But Zoe, do you kind of see, so I'm going to take the example, which I hope everyone will chime with, this January just gone, and I'm sure we've all had our stress points during that period, but can you kind of see, as you gradually kind of adopted digitization and got your digital stack in terms of your people that you're working there with you in the office, can you see the benefits in terms of more efficiencies and less stress?
Absolutely, because we can target specific clients from April. So all our CIS clients, all our CIS subcontractors, we get those out of the way by the end of May. So they get their rebates. Then we target everybody else, and we do it in chunks. But we can get them all done fairly quickly because the information's already there. It's easy to then put it onto an accounting software to submit. But it then freed up our time to take on more clients, because there's been a lot of clients down where we are in Cornwall who have been retiring because of digitalisation. They're still old school. They still, have paper and quill type things. So we can pick up a lot more clients in November, December, January time because we've got that space. So I think we picked up over 20 clients in that 3-month period. Whereas if we were still working with paper and quill, we wouldn't have had that time and resources to be able to onboard new clients.
So it's creating that space for business development, which obviously for all practices is important. That's interesting. And in terms of the general, I guess the one thing, obviously, when software companies talk about tech, and from Chris, your perspective, it's probably bank statements and the old way of sending through paper, and Zoe, from your perspective, it's a client runs in at the last minute with the carrier bag. Can you see that the tangible effect on staff as well? Does it take that stress down on staff a little?
Absolutely. Nobody wants to scan 2 carrier bags full of receipts on the 30th of January. It's much better for staff to be able to plan their week, and for the managers to know where the staff are having pinch points, if you like. It is a no-brainer.
Yeah, That's really good to hear. So I think if we've kind of walked through so far, so if we've got our, I guess, hypothetical client comes in, historically they've been on spreadsheets with a manual 6-week to open bank account. They're now on perhaps a challenger bank like Mettle. They're on to FreeAgent. In terms of the next kind of the next level, so I guess I'm going to step and be a bit agnostic again and walk a little bit away from FreeAgent. What I'm seeing most of, obviously, when I first started with FreeAgent, a lot of my job with practices like you, Zoe, was to come in and help them set up FreeAgent and to kind of get them embedded process-wise and everything else, and then obviously to introduce Mettle. Probably I'd say one of the biggest points of my day at the moment is talking about the add-ons, the integrations, the practice management tools. There seems to be a lot of flux in terms of what people are choosing. I think that survey before showed that. Do you see that yourself at the moment, Zoe? Is there a lot of, in your mind, actually now want to look at this tool? And if so, you've mentioned a couple. Can you just kind of talk through why you're looking at them and what kind of things you're looking at specifically? And please feel free to mention a few other products so we can, keep it nice and agnostic.
Okay, so our CRM system, we are currently going through the change, and we've actually gone with the Bright Group because I like the look of their roadmap. We actually had a webinar this morning before this one, talking to their senior product developer, and their idea is really good. We use Bright Pay, and we've used that for 7 years. We've got 400 odd payrolls that we do. But they're talking about Bright Pay going into what was Accountancy Manager, now called Bright Manager. They've got Bright Propose, they've got Bright Tax. So their roadmap looks really good of how they're going to be bringing all of their products in together. So from a business point of view, at the moment, most of my products were standalone. So I would be tapping into Tax Filer, tapping into Pixie, tapping into... Whereas if you can go into one software, only have to type the name and address in once and it populates everything else. And if they move, you type it in once and it populates everything else. That's a real game changer. And I think
a single source of truth, a single point of data entry, those kind of, again, efficiencies.
Yes. Yeah. And then things don't get missed. It's very easy to update your CRM system, but forget to update your tax software and then send a self-assessment with the wrong address on because it hasn't been done. Whereas if it's all automated and you just do it once, it's there. And it's easier for staff to see as well.
That's interesting. And within FreeAgent, a colleague of mine, Tony, and who many of you probably have listened to and heard from, and his colleague Jem, they're really looking with vengeance at the integration side of things now, because I think the acceptance of the market is that all of us do our sector of the stack well, and that importantly for practices that they are demanding now that we play together and have that kind of synchronicity and, like you say, having that one point of entry. So I would encourage people on the call to have a look at our integrations page, and if you are a FreeAgent partner, be talking to your account manager about what those integrations are, because a lot of them as we speak are being built on, and it's obviously not just integration but how good that integration is and what it can do. Chris, if I can bring you in there, obviously we've talked about the kind of transition of high street banking, what that looked like to kind of challenger bank and an easy opening, etc. What kind of things and trends do you think will be in that space, and how will they benefit accountants and their clients?
I think from a Mettle perspective, we've seen a massive increase in other sectors using Mettle, which I think is going on common trends. So, for example, the top 5 that we've got that bank with Mettle, it used to be just consultancy and contractors. That's now expanded to e-commerce, retail, construction, hairdressers, barbers. So I think there is a trend in saying the potential hobbies that people used to do are becoming their main business and starting to really change over from using maybe their personal accounts into business. So we're starting to see that trend, and that's continued this year, whether that's the dreaded MTD ITSA effect or clients are becoming more savvy. I think from another Mettle perspective is that we're putting a ton of resource into accountancy practices because we realise that we do need to support, and that's not just Mettle, that's just the NatWest group in total. So for example, you've got myself as a point of contact for all that, but I think in NatWest, and I speak on behalf of the company, is that they are recognising that small businesses do need support, and they're trying to make solutions. Mettle's trying to make solutions, are all trying to support the small businesses in any way possible. So I think there'll be even more perspective on the small businesses and what we can do to really power up their business and really try and push their business on moving forward. What that means in terms of software integrations, I think we're just going to keep building on what we've got at the moment. But I think there's going to be a lot more blogs, information, and trying to bring confidence in. We can support your business and we can support accountancy practices. I think that's going to be crucial for us moving forward in the next couple of years.
That seems to get, it's quite, Zoe, quite a subtle shift, isn't it? And I remember when I first started at FreeAgent 5 or so years ago, there was almost this pot of clients that were considered digital clients and deserved digital, and almost a pot of clients that didn't, or for no other reason that perhaps, you know, they were low cost, or they were, you know, too small or too complicated or resistant. And I'm seeing it perhaps with your practice, Zoe, that we've moved from the kind of, is this client digital or not, to your approach, which is the right tool and tools for the client, and that all clients are digital. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. There's no clients, unless they don't have a smartphone, who can't go onto a digital platform. And yes, there's always going to be ad hoc work and rebuilds and things that you need to do, but getting them digitalized now, ready, even before it's you know, if that, you know, does come about. The elephant in the room.
We could have a poll on that, but I don't want to risk the wrath.
No. but even if it doesn't come about, getting your clients digitized is the way forward. You don't have I went to a handover for an old accountant, and literally you walked in the door and there were boxes and boxes of files and paperwork, and on his desk it looked like something out of Oliver Twist. It was just, there was just piles of it, and it smelt musty and horrible. We've got 10 ring binders for all our clients, so the office is a nicer environment as well.
And I would say to those maybe on the call that are still in that first group, or a little bit in that first group, that hopefully, and today we'll do this after the chat, but I'm going to bring up this now, a poll, and Stephen, if you can launch it for me. We still have a lot of practice. Obviously, I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with Zoe, and the reason I brought on today is I look at how she does things on lots of levels, and we haven't got enough time to go into some of the things that I think she does brilliantly. But one of the things I've always admired about her is a very pragmatic approach to digitization. It's not fluffy. It's not LinkedIn glossed, if I'm being honest. It is very pragmatic. It's very down to earth. So I would say that those of you who are still on that digitalization path, please do reach out to your account manager, because one of the things that they'll be looking at are helping you plan. I'm at the moment in planning with a lot of these practices on how they can roll out FreeAgent and then the wider digital stack as well. And you can see from that poll that there is, you know, 50% roughly, if I should show these results, that probably fall in that. So don't lose heart. It's still doable. And that's why hopefully you're on today. Okay. So,
Dave, can I just add in like another quick point that I probably missed before?
Yeah,
That the bank's really focused on and Mettle's really focused on. And
yeah.
so I'm sure you've experienced this, but we're doing a lot of research and a lot of work to try and get clients to get paid faster. That is one of the most crucial points that we've got going on just now, trying to get payment terms, trying to make invoicing easier, trying to make quotes, and that is one of the biggest priorities of Mettle, is trying to get clients get their money in their account faster, and trying to find different ways that we can do that. I think the payment terms and people owed money is just ridiculous amount just now. So we're definitely trying to focus on making that a little bit faster and a little bit easier for clients.
I think the payment one, again, it's a good catch, Chris, and Zoe, you'll chime with this as well. One of the big areas of integration we're looking at are these payments, because if, for instance, you can link a payment provider into that invoice. Again, I'm going to use an example because it's true. My brother-in-law, so we set up Go Cardless on his invoices. You know, if you look, and I haven't, but I will do it sometime, the time to cash of his little kind of business, I can guarantee that that will be very, very much better than it was before we did that. So I think it's a really good catch there. So I'm going to quickly, before I hand over to Regina for our lovely demo, just come and have a look at some of the questions that are coming through. And there's loads here, so please do be assured that we will get back to all of them. You know, if we don't get to them here, but a few kind of questions that are coming up. So we've got questions on integrations, like client engagers just come up. So interestingly, going back to that point on products being worked out, there's kind of lots of clients, lots of products that we are looking in anger at. It's not the wrong word, but you know what I mean, that really kind of getting looked at. The one thing I would say, if you're using FreeAgent, is obviously a lot of you come back to FreeAgent with who you want to integrate with, but please go back to that partner as well, because the way these integrations work are often very much two-sided. So if you as the client can bring your two providers together, it's going to make that very much quicker. So the one tip for you today for integrations is annoy both of us, you know, get in contact and kind of get those answered. One here for you, Zoe, actually, really interesting question. And it's about costs. So obviously we talked about Mettle obviously being free, so we've got that option there. How do you, for example, hypothetically, they're not on Mettle, how do you justify the cost kind of question with a client that says, I don't want to pay for software? And it's a fair ask, because obviously not everyone's going to go on Mettle, not everyone's going to go on FreeAgent. But again, with that digitization, how do you justify the cost of digitization to a client?
The only cost if they're on FreeAgent and Mettle is the either auto entry or DEX that needs to go in, so the subscription for that. If they really want to go onto another piece of software, then we would look at that. I'm a great believer in being good at one or two things and not being, you know, trying to do Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, Panda, or whatever. So just stick to a couple that you can do well. So our clients, they either have a choice of QuickBooks or FreeAgent. That's how I've built my practice. If they insist on staying in Xero, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to bend. Off you go. Sorry.
No, but I think there is some of that, and that's another trend I'm seeing increasingly in practice. Though, as before, the approaches will use whatever the client's using.
Yeah,
it's becoming a less and less used phrase, and it depends on what software. And it could be any type of software, but there is that specificity coming into practice now. We use this software and this software, and they're obviously different types. So no, I think that's a really good point. I'm very much aware of the time, everybody. So what I'm going to do now is give you a choice. So we've got the lovely Regina, my colleague here, who's going to take you through a quick look at FreeAgent. So obviously we've been talking about the product. We want to see it. So for those of you who want to stay on and see the products, please do if you've not seen it before. And also, because I expect some of you will want to dial off at this point, I just want to say a huge thank you to both Zoe and Chris. When I was given the kind of remit to do the webinar, I deliberately chose two people I know who would bring huge value. I'd encourage you to look at Zoe, what Zoe's done, because she really does has proof in the pudding, really, not only digitized, but I've got a lovely practice down in Cornwall, really nice setup, and yeah, really has done what she set out to do in terms of introducing digitization, creating a digital stack, and getting all the clients on there. So Zoe and Chris, really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Regina, I'm going to attempt to do this text swap over now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully, yep,
perfect.
Through.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen? Yep.
Yep, it's all clear. That's good, Regina. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Regina, and I work with the implementation team in FreeAgent. So I'm going to present a quick demo for you with some insights of how FreeAgent can help your practice and your clients. I'm going to start with our practice dashboard. So it's where you're going to manage your clients. On the landing page, you are going to see a list of your clients with some information here. For example, if the client has a FreeAgent through NatWest Group. And here as well, you're going to have the alerts. The alerts screen, which is quite good, is where you're going to set rules to have a list of your clients that match that kind of rules. For example, if you want to see clients that are getting too close to a certain level of turnover to keep an eye on their VAT registration, you can do from this screen. On the account managers, you can set up the level of access for the accountants and bookkeepers on the practice dashboard, and also create different groups for clients and account managers or the accountants. On the payroll, in here you can bulk payroll and do the submissions to HMRC, which is perfect for director's payroll. It's quite easy to do. And under reports, you're going to be able to generate global level reports. For example, see the list of self-assessments to be meted. And under the practice portal, so if you become a partner with FreeAgent, you're going to have exclusive access to our partner resources for your practice and for your clients, and even marketing resources as well, which is quite brilliant. And the learning and accreditation for you and for your team, where you're going to learn more about how FreeAgent works, and also is going to issue you CPD certificates as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump to one of my subscriptions in here to give you a little taste of what your client is going to view. So the landing page is the overview screen, which is going to show you main information of the main areas of the software. So I would say the favorite ones here for accountants is the profit and loss, which is going to show the current year position, including the distributable reserves, and the tax timeline. That's very good. So it's going to be in a client basis, and you're going to see like due dates for payments and submissions. So everything is going to be in here. And as we talked about payroll, I want to show you quickly the payroll screen. This is where you're going to process the payroll, and you can submit individually as well if you wish. You see at the top, the current month you are processing. In the middle, the history of all the payrolls that you processed. At the bottom, the list of the employees, which can easily access their profile and make changes. And then let's go to banking. So in here, your client can add as many banks as they have in their business. And I'm going to access my main one here. In here, they can enable the bank feeds. They can do so via FreeAgent mobile app, which makes their life much easier. Once the bank feeds are uploaded, so the transaction is going to come here. And what I want to talk about is our built-in tool called Guess. So this the Guess tool is going to enable FreeAgent to suggest the nominal code and the VAT treatment, looking at how those transactions were categorized previously. So it's going to help you to categorize, and is going to show you whether a payment matches an invoice, a bill, sorry, or a receipt matches an invoice, making the process review quite easy. And if you are new for FreeAgent, even in your first bank feeds, FreeAgent in average suggests the code for around 60% of the transactions, because it's going to look at transactions, the similar transactions made by other FreeAgent users. So we are very proud of our development team that has been programming this artificial intelligence tool since 2020, which gives really gears up FreeAgent to automate the code for all the transactions. And the last part of this demo, I'm going to show you the file area and the smart capture, which is a feature where your clients are going to be able to take a picture of the receipts from the mobile phone. They are going to be able to upload PDF or images from their laptop or computer. What FreeAgent is going to do is going to pull through the date and the total amount, and you can convert to an expense from here. Also, this feature is going to look at the bank transactions lines, and if the date range of the transaction and the total amount is the same, is going also to allocate automatically the receipt to the transaction for approval. Smart Capture is a paid add-on which has become billable once your client uploads more than 10 images within a month. Okay, so just jumping in one bank account for you to see here how it works. Here I have one transaction in orange, which is for review. When you have the lightning symbol here, means that the receipt is here. It also suggests automatically the category and the VAT. So I can approve and becomes green, and you see here there is a little clip, which means there is an image. So all the lines are color coded as well, which is make easier for you to review and approve them. So that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed this quick demo. Thank you for watching, and if you want to know more about FreeAgent, Stephen is going to launch our last poll, and we can get in touch with you. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Regina. Obviously a very, very brief whistle-stop tour of FreeAgent for those that don't know it. Obviously the two kind of things here. So Stephen's going to launch the poll now. If you'd like us to get in touch. So if it's about the product, so you want to see more of what you've seen today, and hopefully that's giving you a taste of some of the efficiencies and automation that that Zoe was talking about. Really, really important that it's used kind of with AI coming in now. Very, very interesting that Regina hinted at there. Or it might be more on tech stack with your account manager. So as I said, one of the things I'm doing with a lot of my clients is reviewing their processes and tech stack and the integrations we're doing. So maybe it's that you want. So yeah, please do hit those polls now. Can see a few of you on in that, which is great. I'll leave it a bit longer so the votes are still coming in. And I'll just close with saying thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've got something from it. Obviously, it's very hard to cover the subjects in its entirety in an hour. But I hope, you know, with the example of Zoe, like it's always good to hear from an objective source rather than a provider on their own, of someone that's kind of really kind of in there doing it in the trenches, as it were. So really appreciate your time. Again, thank you very much to Chris, to Zoe, to my colleagues Stephen and Regina for managing the chat so brilliantly and for doing a great demo. And then finally, obviously, to yourselves as well. Have a lovely day, and we hope to see you all soon. Thanks very much. Goodbye.